Los Angeles, August 2025. Is Robert De Niro plotting to destroy Nicolas Cage? Hollywood's buzzing with rumors of a scandal that could shatter Tinseltown's elite. In a city where fame is a fragile game, the air smells of betrayal, burnt coffee, and Sunset Boulevard's exhaust. Cage, 61, sits in a gritty coffee shop, sunglasses hiding his unease. He's a legend fighting to stay relevant, but something's off. Strange men watch his every move. Across town, De Niro, 82, schemes in a penthouse, his eyes glinting with a dangerous plan. What's he after? Revenge? Power? Or a truth that could change Hollywood forever? As shadows close in, one thing's clear. This isn't just a game. It's a showdown that'll leave you questioning who really runs this town. Before we start the video, make yourself some tea and write in the comments where you are watching this video from, and now dive into the video. Los Angeles, August 2025, the peak of summer heat. The air above the asphalt shimmers, blending the scents of scorched concrete, Starbucks coffee, and exhaust fumes from cars crawling along Sunset Boulevard. In this city, where every second person dreams of fame and every first person dreams of survival, Nicolas Cage sits in his favorite coffee shop, hidden behind dark sunglasses and a baseball cap. On the table before him lies an untouched coffee and a script he flips through without much enthusiasm. At 61, Cage has seen it all, from an Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas to memes about his over-the-top acting. But lately, his career feels like an old car, still running, but the engine sputtering. The daily grind isn't a flashy place. The walls are adorned with faded posters of old movies. The aroma of freshly ground beans mixes with the scent of croissants. And behind the counter, a young barista with a dragon tattoo on his neck juggles cups with practiced ease. Cage likes this place for its unpretentiousness. Here he's rarely recognized, and if he is, people leave him alone. Today, though, something feels off. He notices two men at a nearby table stealing quick glances at him. One, in an expensive suit, talks on the phone, keeping his voice low. The other, in a leather jacket, nervously taps his fingers on the table. Cage frowns, but returns to his script. Probably fans, he thinks. Meanwhile, a few miles away, in a penthouse at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, Robert De Niro, 82, stands by a panoramic window, holding a glass of whiskey. His gaze is fixed on the city, but his thoughts are elsewhere. De Niro, a legend whose voice is synonymous with Taxi Driver and Goodfellas, has been scarce on screens lately. Not because he doesn't want to act, but because Hollywood has changed. It's all about special effects and superheroes now, he mutters under his breath. His agent, Marvin, a wiry man with a nervous smile, sits on the couch, scrolling through a tablet. Bobby, you heard about this new thing? Streamflix wants to make a heist series. Realistic, with a social edge. They say it could be a hit, Marvin says quickly, as if afraid De Niro will cut him off. A heist. De Niro turns, his brows furrowing. I've played gangsters 100 times. What's new about it? It's not just a heist, Marvin sets the tablet down. It's about how the system breaks people. About inequality, how the rich get richer and the poor. Well, you know. And the kicker, they want you not just as an actor, but as a producer. Full control. De Niro is silent. He knows projects like this are a chance to get back in the game, but they're also a risk. Social issues are a minefield these days. One wrong step, and you're canceled. Still, the idea hooks him. He imagines his name back in the headlines, critics raving about a triumphant return. Yet something gnaws at him. For a project like this to work, it needs a scandal. It needs an event that'll make everyone talk. What if we make it real? De Niro says, his voice low, almost a whisper. Marvin freezes. Real? You serious? Not entirely, De Niro smirks, but there's a dangerous glint in his eyes. Just real enough for everyone to believe. The next day, Cage returns to the daily grind. This time, the coffee shop is half empty. The barista, the same guy with the tattoo, looks tense. Cage sits at his usual table by the window, but before he can open his script, he hears the door slam. A man in a dark trench coat, with a bag slung over his shoulder, walks in. His face is partially covered by a scarf, despite the 90-degree heat outside. Cage tenses. The man orders a coffee, but his eyes keep scanning the room, lingering on Cage longer than necessary. "Excuse me, you're Nicolas Cage, right?" The man suddenly approaches his table. His voice trembles, but there's something rehearsed about it. Cage removes his sunglasses, sizing up the stranger. "Depends on who's asking." I'm just a fan. National Treasure is my favorite movie," the man stammers, but his hands shake as he pulls out his phone. "Can I get a picture?" Cage sighs. He's used to these requests, but something about this guy rubs him the wrong way. "Maybe another time," he says, trying to be polite. The man nods, but doesn't leave. "You live nearby, don't you? In that house up in the Hollywood Hills?" Cage freezes. His address isn't public knowledge. He slowly meets the man's gaze. "How do you know that?" The man steps back, his face paling. I just heard. Sorry, I didn't mean." He turns abruptly, grabs his coffee, and bolts out. Cage sits still, his heart pounding. It's not the first time fans have crossed the line, but this feels different. He pulls out his phone and texts his agent, "Need to check the house security." That evening, De Niro sits at Musso and Frank, Hollywood's oldest restaurant. The air smells of steak and aged wood, and the dim lighting casts a secretive glow. Across from him is the man in the suit from the coffee shop, Victor, a fixer, who solves problems for the rich and famous. "You sure this'll work?" Victor asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Cage isn't stupid. If he suspects, he won't. De Niro cuts him off. "Nicholas loves drama. Give him a mystery, and he'll start unraveling it himself. We just need to feed him the right clues." "What if he goes to the cops?" Victor frowns. De Niro smiles. "Then we get even more buzz." Imagine the headlines. Cage versus De Niro, the heist of the century. Streamflix will eat it up. Victor nods, but doubt lingers in his eyes. "I hired the guy, like you asked. He approached Cage today. But, Bobby, this is a dangerous game. If it goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong," De Niro says, his voice like steel. "We're not robbing his house. We're robbing his peace of mind. And that, Victor, is worth more." Cage returns home late that night. His house in the Hollywood Hills is a modern fortress of glass and concrete, with a view of the twinkling city below. But tonight, it doesn't feel safe. In the garage, he notices one of his cars is parked slightly off-center, as if someone moved it. Inside, everything seems in place, but the air feels heavier, like a stranger's presence lingers. He checks the security cameras, but finds nothing suspicious. Still, the unease doesn't fade. The next day, he calls an old friend, a retired detective named Roy. Roy, a grizzled man with a whiskey-soaked voice, listens to Cage's story while sipping cheap coffee in his cramped apartment. "You think someone's tailing you?" Roy asks, his brows rising. "I don't know." Cage paces the room, his hands trembling with tension. "But that guy in the coffee shop knew my address. And last night, something fell off at the house. I can feel it." Roy nods. "All right, Nick. I'll talk to some people. But you know how it is. Hollywood's full of weirdos. Could just be another nutcase." "What if it's not?" Cage stops, his eyes blazing. "What if it's someone from our world? Someone who knows how to play by this city's rules?" Roy frowns. "You got someone in mind?" Cage doesn't answer, but a name spins in his head. De Niro. They've never been friends, but they respected each other. Lately, though, Cage has heard rumors. De Niro's planning something big, something that could shake Hollywood. And if that's true, Cage isn't about to be a pawn in someone else's game. At the daily grind, the barista, Eddie, wipes down the counter, but his eyes keep darting to the door. He overheard snippets of Victor's conversations with the guy in the trench coat. Though he doesn't know the full story, he senses trouble. He's seen how Cage, his favorite customer, has changed over the past few days, nervous, withdrawn. Eddie, whose father worked 30 years in a factory and always taught him to mind your own business, feels he can't stay silent this time. "Hey, Mary," he whispers to the waitress, a young woman with pink hair. "You saw that guy who talked to Cage yesterday? The one with the scarf?" Mary frowns. "Yeah, he was weird," kept muttering to himself. "I heard him on the phone." Eddie lowers his voice. "I think he's working for someone. And I heard a name. De Niro." Mary laughs. "Seriously? Robert De Niro?" "Eddie, you've been reading too many tabloids." "I'm not kidding," Eddie says, his face serious. "Something's off, and I don't want Cage to get hurt." Cage sits in his living room, holding an old photo, him and his son, still a kid, on the set of The Rock. He remembers when things were simpler, when fame wasn't a burden. But now, he feels his world crumbling. His phone rings, it's Roy. "Nick, I found something." Roy's voice is tense. "That guy you described works for a man named Victor Lund." And Lund. He's tied to De Niro. Cage grips the phone so hard his knuckles turn white. "I knew it," he whispers. "It's him." "Don't jump the gun," Roy says. "We need proof. But if you want to handle this, do it smart. Don't go in swinging. Meet him. Talk. See what he says." Cage nods, though Roy can't see it. He knows a direct confrontation won't solve anything. But he also knows he can't sit idly by. If De Niro's playing a game, Cage will play by his rules, but on his own terms. Inside the restaurant, the air smells of old Hollywood. Carved wooden panels, leather booths, the scent of grilled steak, and cigarette smoke embedded in the walls from the days of Marlon Brando. De Niro sits at a corner table, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp as a hawk's. Victor nervously flips through the menu, though the waiter has already taken their order. The third man, Paul, is a lawyer hired to keep the project within legal bounds. Even he looks tense. "You sure we haven't gone too far?" Paul asks, his voice low but laced with worry. If Cage goes to the press, this could backfire. De Niro sips his whiskey, his eyes never leaving the glass. Nicholas won't go to the press. He's too proud. He'll want to handle it himself. What if he calls the cops? Victor frowns, his fingers trembling as he reaches for a cigarette, though smoking is banned here. "Then we adapt," De Niro smiles, but there's no warmth in it. This is all part of the story. Streamflix wants realism? We'll give them realism. Paul sighs, his hand instinctively tugging at his tie as if it's choking him. "I just want to keep this under control. We've already got people watching his house. If something goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong," De Niro cuts in sharply. "We're not robbing him. We're creating tension. And tension, Paul, is what sells tickets." Meanwhile, Cage steps out of his car. His heart pounds, but he keeps himself in check. Instead of storming into the restaurant, he pulls out his phone and dials De Niro's number. He's not sure if he'll answer, but he wants to try. After 3 rings, he hears a low, gravelly voice. "Nicholas." De Niro sounds mildly surprised, but it feels rehearsed. What a surprise. "We need to talk, Bobby," Cage says calmly, though he's boiling inside. "Now." "Where are you?" De Niro sounds intrigued. "Watching you sip whiskey at Musso's." "Come outside. Or I'm coming in." There's a pause on the other end. Cage hears De Niro chuckle softly. "You always were dramatic, Nick." "Fine. Let's talk. But not here. Meet me at Griffith Park in an hour." "Come alone." The line goes dead. Cage stares at the restaurant's facade, his mind racing. He knows this could be a trap, but there's no turning back. He gets in his car and heads to the park. Griffith Park at night is a place of contrasts. Dark silhouettes of trees stand against the glow of the city below, and the silence is broken by the calls of nocturnal birds and the distant hum of traffic. Cage stands by an old bench, his hands in his jeans pockets. He's dressed in a simple jacket and cap, but his posture betrays his tension. He waits. De Niro appears 10 minutes later, his figure emerging from the darkness like a ghost. He walks slowly, with the same confidence that made him an icon. He's wearing a dark coat, holding an unlit cigar. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," De Niro says, stopping a few feet away. "And you look like you're in over your head," Cage replies, his voice firm but calm. "What's this game, Bobby? Why are your people watching my house?" De Niro raises an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "My people? You're paranoid, Nick." "Don't play with me." Cage steps closer, his eyes blazing. "I know about Victor. I know about your project. If you're trying to ruin my reputation to get back in the headlines, you picked the wrong guy." De Niro is silent, his gaze turning cold. He tucks the cigar into his pocket. "You think this is about you?" he says finally. "You're wrong. This is bigger than you or me. It's about how this city works. How it chews up people like us and spits them out when we're no longer useful." Cage frowns. He expected denials, excuses, but not this. "So what? You decided to play God? Scare me, film it, sell it to stream flicks? That's your big plan?" "Not quite," De Niro smiles, "but there's a sadness in it. I want to show people the truth. About how far we'll go for fame. About how the system makes us tear each other apart." Cage freezes. He feels the weight of De Niro's words, the pain he's carried himself for years. But it doesn't quell his anger. "And you chose me as your punching bag?" he asks, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "I chose you because you're the only one who'd get it," De Niro says. "You're not just an actor, Nick. You're a fighter. You always have been." Cage looks away, his thoughts in turmoil. He wants to believe it's a bluff, but something in De Niro's voice makes him doubt. "If you want my help, why all this circus? The surveillance, the threats." "Because otherwise you wouldn't be here," De Niro shrugs. "You'd lock yourself in your house and wait for it to blow over. But now you're here, and we can change the game." At the Daily Grind, Eddie finishes his shift. He stands in the back alley, where the air smells of garbage and spilled coffee, smoking a cigarette. His mind is on Cage. He doesn't know what to do, but he feels he has to act. He pulls out his phone and texts Mary, "We need to talk to Cage. I know it's crazy, but I heard that guy mention a heist." "A real heist." Mary replies almost instantly, "Are you nuts? If this is true, we need to go to the cops." Eddie shakes his head, though Mary can't see it. He knows the police won't believe a barista without evidence. But he also knows Cage isn't the type to sit back. Eddie resolves to find a way to reach him, even if it means risking his job. In the park, Cage and De Niro stand face to face, like boxers before a fight. But instead of punches, they trade words, and each blow stings deeper. "If I agree," Cage says slowly, "what do you want from me?" De Niro looks him in the eye. "I want you to play the lead. Not in a series, but in reality. We'll stage a heist, fake, but convincing enough for everyone to believe. We'll make Hollywood watch. And when the dust settles, we'll show them the truth." Cage laughs, but there's no joy in it. "You're insane, Bobby. You think I'll put myself on the line for your show?" "Not for the show." De Niro lowers his voice. "For us. For everyone this city has crushed. You know how it works, Nick. We either fight or we fade away." Cage is silent. He thinks of his career, the years of struggle, how Hollywood has lifted him to the heavens and dropped him into the abyss. He thinks of his son, whom he promised to be better for. And he thinks that maybe, just maybe, De Niro is right. "I need to think," he says finally. De Niro nods. "You've got 24 hours. But remember, Nick, if you're not with us, you're against us." He turns and walks into the darkness, leaving Cage alone. The wind rustles the leaves, and the city below keeps shining, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in its shadows. The next morning, Cage wakes to a knock at the door. He checks the cameras and sees Eddie, the barista, standing on his porch, holding a cardboard coffee cup. Cage frowns, but opens the door. "What are you doing here?" he asks, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Eddie looks scared, but his eyes burn with determination. "I heard something, Mr. Cage." "About a heist. About De Niro. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want you to get set up." Cage freezes. He looks at Eddie, at his trembling hands, at his genuine concern. And in that moment, he realizes the game De Niro started is already spiraling out of control. But instead of fear, Cage feels something else: hope. If an ordinary barista is willing to risk everything for him, maybe all isn't lost. "Come in," Cage says, stepping aside. "Tell me everything." The morning sun bathes the Hollywood Hills in golden light, but inside Nicolas Cage's house, the atmosphere is far from serene. He sits at the kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee that's long gone cold. Across from him is Eddie, the barista from the daily grind, whose voice trembles as he recounts everything he's overheard. Snippets of Victor's conversations, mentions of De Niro, talk of a heist everyone will remember. Cage listens silently, his face unreadable, but his eyes blaze. He knows he's standing on the edge of a precipice, but for the first time in a long while, he feels he can control the situation. "Why are you telling me this?" Cage asks, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You could have stayed quiet. This isn't your fight." Eddie fidgets, his fingers nervously gripping the edge of the table. "My dad always said, if you see something wrong, don't look away. You've always been kind to us at the coffee shop. And I heard that guy, Victor, laughing like it's some kind of game. But it's not a game for you, is it?" Cage smiles, but there's a bitterness in it. "You're a good kid, Eddie. But this is Hollywood. Everyone's playing a game, even if they pretend they're not." He stands and walks to the window. The view of the city is calming, but only for a moment. His thoughts swirl around De Niro's proposal. A fake heist to shake up the media, make everyone talk about them, about the system, about inequality. The idea is insane, but there's something alluring about it. Cage knows he can play the role better than anyone. But the cost? His peace, his reputation, maybe even his freedom. And now, with Eddie standing before him, risking his own safety, Cage realizes he can't let this game hurt the innocent. "Listen," Cage turns back to Eddie. "You did your part. Now go home. And don't say a word to anyone, got it?" Eddie nods, but doubt lingers in his eyes. "What are you gonna do?" Cage sighs. "What I do best. Play my part." That same day, Cage calls De Niro. They agree to meet at a quiet bar on the city's outskirts, far from the prying eyes of paparazzi. The rusty anchor resists, the bar smells of spilled beer and old carpets. The walls are lined with faded photos of forgotten stars, and a jukebox in the corner hums Frank Sinatra. Cage sits at a table in the shadows, holding a glass of soda. De Niro walks in, his coat swaying as he moves, like he's still on the set of Goodfellas. "You look better than yesterday," De Niro says, sitting down. "Made up your mind?" Cage sips his soda, his eyes locked on De Niro. "I'm in, but on my terms." De Niro raises an eyebrow, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Go on." "No real heist," Cage says firmly. "No victims, no innocents getting hurt. We stage a show, but it's clean. And I want this to be more than just about us. If we're talking about the system, let's show its real face. Not just rich versus poor, but how Hollywood forces everyone to play by its rules." De Niro is silent, his fingers slowly twirling his whiskey glass. Finally, he nods. "You surprised me, Nick. I thought you'd just want the spotlight." "The spotlight's a trap," Cage replies. "I want people to think. If we do this, it's not for stream flicks or headlines. It's for the people like Eddie, working for pennies and still believing truth matters." De Niro laughs, this time genuinely. "Eddie? The barista? You're serious." "You laugh," Cage frowns. "But he risked everything to warn me." And you hired people who scared him, me, everyone around us. If we're doing this, Bobby, we do it right. De Niro leans back, his gaze thoughtful. All right, Nick. Your terms. But remember, the show has to be convincing, or no one will buy it. The next 2 weeks are a whirlwind of planning. Cage and De Niro, along with a small team De Niro carefully selected, craft the heist script. They decide the target won't be Cage's house, but his fictional collection of rare scripts, a believable fabrication to grab attention. The heist will take place during a charity gala. Cage is hosting to raise funds for local schools, adding a social angle. Rich stars, poor kids, a system holding everyone hostage. The night arrives quickly. Cage's Hollywood Hills mansion glows with lights. Guests, a mix of actors, producers, and local activists, buzz, clutching champagne flutes. The air is thick with a scent of expensive perfume, freshly cut grass, and salmon canapes. Eddie, invited by Cage as a guest, stands in a corner, feeling out of place. His jeans and clean shirt clash with the tuxedos around him, but Cage insisted he come. You sure I belong here? Eddie asks as Cage approaches with a glass of water. You're here because I trust you, Cage replies, his voice low but firm. And because you reminded me why I'm still doing this. Eddie blushes but nods. He doesn't know the full plan, but he senses Cage and De Niro are up to something big. Meanwhile, the heist begins. 2 actors hired by De Niro, dressed in masks and dark clothing, slip into Cage's upstairs study. They stage the theft of the scripts, leaving fake evidence. Scattered papers, an open window, a broken lock. Hidden cameras, set up in advance, capture everything, but the guests suspect nothing. When the crime is discovered, Cage plays his part flawlessly. He steps before the guests, his face pale, his voice trembling with feigned shock. I've been robbed, he says, and the room falls silent. But this isn't about scripts. It's about how we let the system steal our dreams. Guests exchange glances, some whisper, others pull out phones to record. De Niro, standing in the crowd, gives a barely perceptible smile. The plan is working. The next day, news of Cage's robbery explodes in the media. Headlines scream, National Treasure, star victim of brazen heist. But Cage and De Niro don't stop there. A few days later, they accidentally leak a video where Cage reveals the heist's true purpose. He talks about Hollywood's inequalities, how the system drains actors, workers, dreamers. He mentions Eddie, without naming him, as the people who keep this city running. The video goes viral. Social media erupts with debates. Some call it a genius PR stunt, others a manipulation, but everyone's talking. Streamflix, sensing the potential, offers Cage and De Niro a series deal, but they decline. This wasn't about money, Cage says in an interview. It was about truth. Eddie, back at the daily grind, notices customers looking at him differently. Mary, the waitress, teases that he's almost famous. But Eddie doesn't care. He sees Cage, despite the chaos, stayed true to himself, a man who believes in justice. A month later, Cage sits at the daily grind, holding a new script. This time, he wrote it himself, a story about 2 stars who challenge the system. He doesn't know if it'll get made, but that's not the point. He feels he's reclaimed something vital. De Niro calls him that evening. You were right, Nick, he says, his voice soft, almost weary. We didn't change Hollywood, but maybe we got some people thinking. Cage smiles, gazing at the city through the window. Sometimes that's enough, Bobby. They don't become friends, but something new emerges between them, respect. And down below, in the city that never sleeps, people keep dreaming, fighting, falling, and rising. Somewhere among them, Eddie brews coffee, knowing that even a small step can spark change.